Hello and welcome back. Alright, so on a previous video we started working on the Towards Data Science tutorial, full text search with Node.js and ElasticSearch on Docker. So basically in the first tutorial all we did was build out the Docker file, Docker Compose, make sure that that was going to run okay. So we're starting over now, we're going to do the Node.js. So we're setting up our initialization of our environment. We're going to make sure our package.json has all the information we need. And again, mind you, I'm speeding up the text typing so you don't have to watch me type out everything because it does take some time. But here we go. We're going to start off. We're going to create our client. Our client is going to connect to Elasticsearch and make sure that we can get our queries through. So we're setting up our JavaScript right now, and this is going to be kind of the main Elasticsearch connection. We're also going to need some additional helper functions here. So we're going to need to create an index. So we'll set this file up. Okay, and obviously a try catch. If we created the index, great. If not, throw an error. Awesome. All right, so moving on, we're going to set the quotes mapping. All right, so we're going to have a schema for the quotes that we're going to want to map to Elasticsearch, so we're going to set that up here. Okay, awesome. Now we have our mapping in place. And of course, error reporting if necessary. Beautiful. Alright, moving forward, now we're going to have to check the connection. So when we open up our application, what we're going to do is run the check connection, and we're going to wait until the connection is active to start working with Elasticsearch. Obviously, it makes sense. So we bound our containers before, but now this function is actually going to make sure that the container is ready to accept incoming connections. Right, awesome. And moving forward, we're going to go ahead and set up our module exports. Alright, so this will be some fun later on. They've actually got this combined into one file, so later we're actually going to have to concatenate all that together into one file, but we're going to digress for now and just keep moving forward here. So now we're going to set up the index file here. Okay, and we're going to set up our data directory. So that's actually where that index file is going to reside. And we're going to set up our data structure. This is going to grab the data, which is actually stored in a file called data.json, which again we'll later grab from their GitHub because it's not something that we create, it's something we're going to pull. Alright, and so we're going to go ahead and create a function to populate the database. So this is going to walk through using that structure, grab all the data out of the data.json, which is something like 21,000 lines, and it's going to import it into our Elasticsearch database for us. Right. And we're going to create a main method here, and that's just going to check the Elastic connection, make sure the indexes are updated, right, and add our data in. Very good. Alright, so now we need to create a server to manage everything. So we're going to create a RESTful API server, and this is going to be pretty standard. We're going to create our main index.js file. We're going to end up using the MVC approach, right, the model view controller. So we're going to set those all up separately here. All right, so in the first, basically we're going to start and create the basic server. We're going to set up our request approaches and our listener, and a little output there to let us know that the server is ready to listen. All right, awesome. Moving on, we've got to establish our routes. So we're going to create a reference to our routes, and right now we're just basically going to have a default route URL and a quotes URL, so we can append additional routes later. All right, excellent. And moving forward, we're going to set up our controller. So this is actually going to handle the functionality of our routes. So when we get home or when we get the quotes, we're going to set up our functionality here. So here we're setting up get quotes. And this is going to return a bad error message if we're missing the parameters we need, which of course is the text for the full search. Otherwise, it's going to return the search results or some other undefined error depending on what was submitted to the URL. All right, great. And it looks like everything is good in there. And we're going to set up our models. And for brevity's sake, we're just going to copy these in here. And this is going to be how our functionality works out here to get the quotes. And we're going to set up actually something for inserting new quotes, which we may get to in a later session. And we'll go back to our package.json, and we're going to add our main start script. That way we know where the program is supposed to enter. And we're going to bind our server into the main method here and server.start. Awesome. All right, so now we're going to run Docker Compose up, and we got a bunch of errors, so we're going to work through and quickly resolve some of these things for your reference. A lot of these things are typographical errors as I was setting up the files. Some of it, as I mentioned, we're going to have to concatenate a lot of the functionality into one particular file, so we'll sort that out. And then the other is going to be grabbing that data.json file. So what I ended up doing is actually ripping their GitHub, running it because I want to get the file local, which this was the quickest and easiest way to do it, was just to clone the repo and grab the file out of there. It also gave me the opportunity to run their GitHub repository and make sure that the program executed as designed in the tutorial. And so we actually run into some interesting debugging related issues there. So let's go ahead and just make sure everything is all set there. We're concatenating everything into one JS file for each of those segments. Again, based on the way the imports were bound, it's easier to just do it that way rather than import the files into each other. And we're going to try to run our Docker Compose build and see what's going on. Alright, so now this is me running their actual GitHub repository. I'm going to pull it up just to make sure that the code actually executes the way it is intended. That way, if I have any different execution, I can debug it against their instance, which makes it easier for me to debug what's happening. So I'm looking through and curling, their server is now up and running. Okay, good. And there we go. So we get our results, but the query actually, interestingly, uses a limit on the results, and that limit doesn't seem to be executing. So that may end up being some sort of future part 3 to see if we can debug that out, but at least they are getting the quotes in response, so that is positive. So we're going to shift gears back to working with ours and debugging to make sure that we have everything up and running. Okay, and just taking a look through their code now, making sure that the requests are correct. Alright, so shifting back to ours, we're going to take a look at our source. We're going to side by side it a little bit just to kind of debug through some of the issues here. And let's see. Aha! There we go. Looks like we might want to combine some of this together, so we're going to go ahead and concatenate those files together and make sure that that's alright.